Trump wants us all to know that he is not weird, and neither is J.D. Vance.
Well, they're the weird ones, and if you've ever seen her with the laugh and everything else, that's a weird deal going on there. They're the weird ones. Nobody's ever called me weird. I'm a lot of things, but weird I'm not, and I'm up front, and he's not either, I will tell you. J.D. is not at all. They are.
Trump is awfully defensive these days, and for good reason. The Democrats have been reinvigorated with a younger candidate with more fighting spirit and unity than we've seen from the Dems in a long, long time. And it's not just a fighting spirit, but a pointed, targeted campaign complete with a simple catchphrase that has been picked up and embraced by both the mainstream media and social media.
These guys are just weird. That's who they are. So it isn't much else. Don't give them the power.
Marketing 101, repeat something over and over again and drive it into people's brains. The more they hear it and the more they understand it, the more they believe it. It's what Trump has been doing all this time. It's about time that the Dems finally caught on. But what the Dems have been doing is especially brilliant in its simplicity because they're just saying something that most people already knew and believed. Kamala Harris doesn't actually have to convince anyone that the Republicans are a bunch of weirdos. We already think that.
Now, I would call her up here to come and speak, but then I think I'd have to sleep on the couch tonight, so I'll leave her alone.
Who knows, maybe we'll pay off our $35 trillion, hand him a little crypto check, right? We'll hand him a little Bitcoin.
I know I've called them weirdos in the past, maybe not on camera, but certainly in my personal life. But all of this goes back to the 2016 presidential election, when Trump was facing off against Hillary Clinton. In one of their debates, Trump was being super creepy, lurking behind Clinton the entire time. He thought it was a power move, and it did work to destabilize her a bit, but not because she was so intimidated by his masculinity or authority or whatever he thought. It was because he was being creepy and weird. She said he made her skin crawl. In a post-debate interview, Kamala Harris, who was running for the U.S. Senate at the time, was asked about the lurking, and she said that if he had done that to her, she would have turned around and asked him, "Why are you being so weird?" And she would have been right to. Clinton chose not to acknowledge Trump's lurking at the time, but she probably was dumbfounded by the whole thing. In her debate prep, I'm sure she wasn't anticipating lurking or just general weirdness from Trump. Maybe combativeness, maybe pettiness, or maybe childish behavior, maybe lying, but not lurking. Lurking is so far out of the realm of normalcy that even when preparing to debate someone like Trump, a normal person wouldn't even think to consider maybe he'll lurk. But speaking of childish behavior, Trump's new defense against the weirdo allegations is, "I'm not weird, you're weird, I'm normal." On the Clay Travis and Buck Sexton show, the host brought up the question of transgenderism in sports. "Isn't that weird?" he asked. And Trump ranted not about transgenderism in sports, but about how not weird he was. "They're the weird ones," he kept saying. "Nobody has ever called me weird," he said. "That's not true. Kamala Harris has a weird laugh," he said. He's really trying to make that a thing. J.D. Vance, he said, is not at all weird. J.D. Vance is objectively weird. Everyone thinks so. Everyone has always thought so. Trump doesn't even like J.D. Vance. But then he said that it's weird how the Democrats want open borders and how the Democrats want people from prisons and mental institutions from other countries to just flood into this one. All untrue on several levels. It's weird how Trump, a presidential candidate, keeps saying something over and over again that's repeatedly been fact-checked and debunked. He comes across not as an intelligent person capable of receiving and integrating information as it's presented to him, but rather as a con artist who is desperate to become president. And desperation is not a trait that you want from a leader. Then he said, well, it's all a soundbite. And he would know, wouldn't he? He is the king of repeating something over and over again just to get those sound bites. He just doesn't like that it's finally being used against him. Honestly, I don't know why it took the Dems this long to figure it all out, but no one is more disappointed by this turn in strategy than Trump. As I said, he is now desperate to win back control of the narrative, and we're seeing him flounder in a way we really haven't seen from him. This whole campaign centered around how weird the Republicans are is refreshing because for the longest time, it felt like something people just couldn't say. Democrats go high when they go low, right? That was our thing for the longest time. Thanks, Michelle Obama. It was a nice thought, but all it did was give Republicans license to say more and more absurd and unhinged things, knowing that Democrats would likely not call them out for it. There was a time when people respected each other's beliefs, but a big part of why that was the case was because other people's beliefs didn't generally affect you. Yes, there was always bigotry and racism and sexism, etc., but a lot of these things weren't codified in government as of a few decades ago. The most notable exception to that perhaps being LGBTQ rights, which was the specific issue that was brought up in the podcast. But the LGBTQ community is a great example of a group that was and is being directly harmed by other people's beliefs, particularly in recent years. They have less rights than people outside of that community, and they are often at best the butt of jokes and at worst the victim of hate crimes. And for people who to this day are so adamantly against them, it really is kind of weird. And I want to make a distinction though. It's one thing to not quite understand something or to be unable to personally relate to something. It's one thing to be concerned that your friend or relative who might be a part of that community could potentially live a more difficult life because of this thing that they did not choose for themselves. It's one thing to have to reconcile your love and compassion for these people with the anti-LGBTQ beliefs that you had grown up your entire life believing. It's fine to take time for yourself to do that. But it is another thing entirely to actively fight against an entire group of people, to deliberately make life more difficult for people who are just trying to live their lives, find love, and live authentically just like everyone else. And when they come up with all of these weird theories and fears surrounding a group of people just to justify their bigotry, you have to ask them, why do you care so much? Just live your life and let them do the same. Why have you made your hatred for one group of people everyone else's problem? What is your problem, and why can't you just deal with that on your own, you weirdo? And why is JD Vance so obsessed with cat ladies? Because he's a weirdo, and that is it. All right, that is it for me. If you got anything out of this, please like the video and subscribe for more. Thanks.